I had a kidney infection, and I was like on the couch staring at my wall, like, I hate this white wall. And so like day 3, I like found a can of paint here, and I like painted it all up. And I remember my roommate came home and she's like, you're like dying on the couch. What have you done?
Yeah, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and this week I'm talking to Haley Badenhop, who is a killer muralist, and she's actually walking us through step by step how to do a mural. Like, she's showing us the process of her doing a mural on a wall and walking us through every single step, which is something we have never done before on the show, and I think you're really going to like it. She's also giving away a spot in her full mural course that's online now, and all you have to do is hit like on the video and leave a comment down below to be entered. So make sure you've done that, and then let's hop right in. Haley, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so excited to chat with you.
Me too. I feel like this has been a really long time coming. Like, for people, I mean, obviously no one else knows this, but you and I met like 3 years ago at a conference, and I've been saying ever since that you should come on this show.
I know. It was like back when I had a podcast, and I feel like I was like, you should really be on it. And you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. And now you have your own show.
I know. It's so weird how much changes in a couple of years. But for people who don't know you, can you give us a little rundown of who you are, what you do, and all that kind of stuff? I think they are going to already know what we're going to be talking about, but just like give us a little background.
Yeah, sure. I'm Haley Badenhop. I am a muralist and illustrator out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So the main thing I do is probably murals 75% of my time, and then maybe like digital illustrations 25%, and then some fine art on the side. So I really enjoy doing murals, and it's kind of been a process of going from design to watercolor to big, large-scale acrylics. So that's my gig right now. Now it's COVID, so just figuring out that.
Yeah. Okay, and I feel like you're super downplaying like how crazy talented you are at murals and how much of a big deal you are in the mural world. So I'm gonna make you brag for a second. Can you like give people an idea of some of the like really cool murals you've done lately? Because there are some that you need to mention.
Yeah, so I guess probably one of my coolest ones last year was I spent a month in Shanghai, China, and did 4 murals there. 2 of them were with another muralist, Gemma O'Brien, who probably a lot of people know if they've been following murals. We did one in Tiffany & Co. We did one on the street. And then before I left, I did 2 at 2 Orange Theory locations there in their fitness facilities. So it was really fun month. After that, I did one in Mexico City for Orange Theory. I've done a few more for Orange Theory. And then a really cool one here in town in Jackson, that's downtown on the square, is one of my favorites that I did for the Wildlife Museum here. So yeah.
Yeah, you're just like casually like, yeah, I spent a month in Shanghai and did murals for Tiffany, but like also like that's a big deal. It's so cool. I remember seeing that and being like, what?
It was so ridiculous, like the whole China trip.
How long have you been doing murals?
Well, actually, this one so behind me is, I think, my first mural I ever did, which was maybe 6 years ago here. I had a kidney infection, and I was like on the couch staring at my wall, like, I hate this white wall. And so like day 3, I like found a can of paint here, and I like painted it all up. And I remember my roommate came home and she's like, you're like dying on the couch. What have you done? And then I kind of painted up this whole place and like did some for my friends, my parents in between there. And then I was doing like really small watercolors, a lot of wedding watercolors and pets. And I kind of wanted to do something that more people could look at, more people could use. I could maybe like make prints out of it. And so I started doing like basically telling people and like reaching out to people, telling them that I did them. And it was kind of like a slow trickle, I would say, where people kind of started to recognize me more as a muralist than just like got less clients for watercolor. And then people would be like, oh, can you paint this larger space? So it wasn't like an overnight thing. It was kind of just reaching out, telling people this is what I do, and then doing them. And now it's been maybe like 3 years.
I love that answer because I think a lot of people just assume that like they have to be really good at murals, and then all of a sudden they're a muralist, and it's not like, but you're the prime example of just like, you just did it because you wanted to on your own wall, and then you realized you really liked it and you started doing it more, and just like it gradually became this thing, and now it's like, what did you say, 95% of what you do? So I love that. Did you say 95 or 75?
Probably 70. I mean, last year was probably 9 to 5, to be honest. This year it's like a lot less. I had a bunch of projects lined up, and I was like, this year's gonna be easy.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and it was like, they're all like, maybe in a few months.
Yeah.
Or years.
Well, I think COVID is like a great opportunity for people to just start painting on their own walls because they're stuck in their homes, which is what you're going to discuss today. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about, because like you're teaching this as a course now, which is one of the reasons I really wanted you to get on here, because I know that a lot of people really want to learn like the ins and outs of murals, and I know that's what you teach in your course. So really, can you give us like a 30-second summary of what's in your course?
Yeah, sure. So I tried to make it all encompassing of things like, if I wanted to go paint a mural even for a client today, like if I did this course, I could do it. And so it starts out and does all the design. So everything from all the supplies that you need, how to put the mural on the wall, how to paint it. I walk you through painting an entire mural on a pretty large wall, like a typical size wall that would be in a house. And then after that, I go through all the business stuff, like how to reach out to clients, the pricing methods.
Yeah.
Yep. A pricing worksheet, and kind of like marketing and showing off your work and things like that. So yeah, it's basically everything that you need to do a mural. And if you do a mural, I mean, they're great because they're pretty high priced. Usually people are willing to pay a higher price for murals. So you get your investment back really quickly.
Yeah. And I think that as much as people, it's like the dream to do murals, I think they can be super overwhelming because it just feels like it's so permanent. And if you screw it up, there's no way of fixing it. But I know there are ways to fix it. And I know that like you teach all of those tricks. So I think it's a really great course for people to join. Speaking of which, I did, just for everybody watching, I convinced Haley to give away a free spot in the course for people watching this video. So if you're watching, hit like on the video and then leave us a comment, literally saying anything in the comments down below, and you'll be entered to win a spot in her course. So I mean, like, it's a no-brainer. Just type something in below.
Right. Love it.
Yeah. But I think we should just jump into your lesson, and then I have like a list of a couple more questions I want to ask you afterwards, just about like things that I know people wonder about murals, but I want to see your process. So let's do the lesson and then we'll come back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's run through painting a mural. I'm gonna use this space right above my bed. I had a mural here actually yesterday, and I painted over it white, just the color of the wall. My bed that I have now is a little bit higher than it used to be, so I changed this mural from being full length on the wall. I just want it to be centered above my bed. So I made a little mark right here where my headboard ends so that I know I want to center it in this space. So the materials that I have for this mural that we're going to do is I have Sherwin-Williams paint samples, which look like this. I wouldn't necessarily use this for a project for somebody else, but for your own house, they're perfect. They're still long lasting, interior, exterior, but they just don't have the longevity that you might want for a client project. So I had a bunch of leftovers from previous projects. I'm going to use those. And then I'm actually going to mix some of the colors because they're not exact to what I want. So I just have little jars to do that. I have this vine charcoal. This is what I like to trace my murals in. Some people just like to use a pencil. I prefer this because it rubs off really easily. And on a white wall, I don't really want to use white chalk. I have a couple paints that are just like fine art paints. So this is gold and a little lime green. I didn't have house paint this color, so I just added a few little bits that I wanted to use these colors with. And then the paint brushes I'm using are a variety, but mainly 1.5 inch brushes. These are good like mid-size brushes. I have a 2-inch little guy and then a 1 inch and just like a fine art one for some lettering that I'm going to put on in the end. And then last, I just have some wipes for any mess ups that I have along the way. So the first thing we're gonna do to get started on this mural is I already drew it up on my iPad, and I actually took a poll on Instagram. I made 2 designs and I asked Instagram what they liked better. They picked this design. So now I have what Instagram wants above my bed. So we're gonna go with this one. It's kind of like a paint by number, how we're gonna approach this. And we have 6 colors. I'll do the grays, the blues, the green, and then I'll end with the gold cactus and the word. I'm gonna wait until the gray dries to write the word. So right now I'm gonna project it onto the wall, which is just the easiest method to project your design onto the wall. It's just very straightforward, and if you've already done the design, it's the easiest way to get it on there. You can use a lot of different methods that I go through more in the course, but the simplest and the quickest one to do is just use a projector. So I set up my projector and we'll turn all the lights off and get that going. But the last thing I wanted to mention is we're actually gonna project it twice because I don't wanna project the words on. I don't wanna paint around the words yet. I'm gonna paint all of the background first and then I'll paint the words over it. Okay, so let's turn on the projector and get sketching. Okay, so I'm projecting my mural right now. I've got it to look how I had it looked on the mock-up on my iPad, and now it's on my wall. The projector I'm using is probably around $100. It's a pretty simple projector. It does well in low light when it's pretty dark and on closed spaces. So once you get bigger and also in like a lot more light during the day, if you're trying to trace and start a mural like in midday light, it's a little bit more difficult. So I suggest tracing at night unless you want to buy a way more expensive projector, then it's going to do better. But this one I just have setting at home. It's great for little projects like this. So I'm going to take my charcoal and I'm just going to trace the different colors that I have on here. And then I'm also going to put a little mark on the colors just to remember what color they are so I don't forget. Okay, that was super simple. Now I have all of these color blocks drawn in. I left off the font and the hand lettering because I'm gonna do that later after I've painted in this gray. So in that case, I'll probably start with this gray when I paint so that it dries the quickest. And then I can get to that purple after I reproject. All right, so we're ready to get started. That was a really simple setup. If it's a bigger mural, it's gonna take much longer and be a lot more involved. But for this is great. This is perfect for like your home office or even above your bed like I'm doing it, or maybe like an inspirational quote in your kitchen or your bathroom, something like that. Okay, so let's get started with our first color. We're gonna start with gray right here. That's the color that we're gonna use underneath the letters, and then we'll move on from there. So my gray that I have is already mixed up. It's kind of this purplish gray color, so I don't have to do any mixing. I'm actually just going to use it straight out of this sample thing because it's so easy to hold. I love it. And I'm just going to paint the first coat over this middle one. A few things that I'm watching out for as I do this are, as you've noticed, this black charcoal on the edge. If you decide to use black charcoal, if you're using a lighter color, the black will mix in with the color and cause it to become a little bit black. So that would be a downfall of using this charcoal. So usually as I'm gonna wipe it with a wipe beforehand or even my finger to make it look not mix in so much. But for this one, this color's pretty much dark enough that it's blending fine with me. And then another thing to look for is when you're painting, don't put your paint on really thick. Sometimes it's tempting to put your paint on really thick because you only want to do 1 coat instead of 2 or 3 or however many it takes. But it's not going to look as nice in the end if you have all of these coats, and then most likely it's going to dry like at different rates. So it's just easiest if you put on 1 light coat and then just go over it really quickly with another coat. It's just gonna work better and look better in the end. So we've got our gray on. So what I wanna do next is probably go to this blue because I'd like this to dry a little bit so that I can eventually go in and do this edge here while this is dry, because I don't want the edges to merge together. If I'm using this green next and this is still wet, it's just gonna be more straightforward if I can do this one And then there's only a little bit. Maybe I'll leave like a little sliver. It's kind of up to you and like how you like to paint, but I'll probably leave a little sliver or see if I can get really close if I'm going to be a little daring. And then right here, I don't have to worry about the edges hitting yet. So I'm kind of giving time for places to dry as I'm going along and thinking about that. So let's mix up the blue. I like that. I used equal amounts of this darker blue and lighter blue. Sometimes it takes a while to get the color that you want, and I would suggest using little bits at a time, because if you use a lot at a time, it can become like a lot of paint, and then all of a sudden, to make it a little lighter, you have to add a ton of white or something like that. So just start with little bits, because you can always add more. All right, so that's good. You don't have to get this exactly perfect, because I'm gonna take gold over it at the end, so I know that my lines don't have to line up like exactly right. It's up to you how precise you are. You could, of course, get a finer paintbrush, like a way smaller one, and go around it if you're a perfectionist. I'm just doing this as kind of a simple mural to show you guys, so I'm not gonna get really fine in here. And right now it kind of looks like this might only need one coat, but wait till it dries, because once it dries, you'll see if you can see the streaks of the wall through it. And usually it needs 2 coats. So don't get your hopes too far up. All right, so we've done that. Now I'm gonna jump to actually this blue. Since it's so close, it's okay if this blue runs into it. I don't care too much. The next blue I'm using is just a touch darker. All right, cool, so we're cruising through this. Next, we're gonna go to this lime green color. It's not the best idea to use fine art paints for murals, because usually they're really big and you don't wanna spend all that money getting little tiny tubes of fine art paint. But this was kind of a particular color, so that is why I'm using it. I went to the paint store and looked for a lime green paint, and they didn't have anything in house paint that was close. And I also live in a really tiny town, so I would have had to order it from a city or somewhere else. And I thought this was close enough, so we're gonna go with it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that matte medium makes it really clear. So you have to mix it up really well, or else I'm gonna see a lot of white through it. You can probably tell that. But I am liking the color that it is. And this color, I picked this color scheme because I actually have a rug on my floor. It's a Moroccan rug, so it's really colorful, and it has this lime green, the purple. So I wanted to take those colors and kind of mesh them here so it coincides with the whole room. And if you're wondering what colors to use in your murals, sometimes that's a good idea. If you can look at one thing in your house that is like the color scheme that you want to go with. Maybe you have some decorative item that's hanging up, and you can pull some colors from that to use as your color scheme for your mural. It's kind of a good starting point. Okay, so while I'm waiting here, before I go into the gold of the cacti, I'm gonna do another coat on this gray, because I know that I want this gray to be ready for the lettering that's gonna go over top. So I'm gonna do another coat on this, and then I'm gonna kind of check out how well these are drying. I luckily live in a really dry climate, so stuff dries really fast here. If you're in a humid climate, you might have to wait a little bit longer. All right, so it's coming along. And as I can look at this as it's drying, I see that I'll definitely need another coat on this blue. I can see some white spots that I maybe missed or that are shining through. So it's important to kind of look at that as you're going and do a second coat. It's just gonna make it look so much more clean at the end. So now we're at this point. And one thing I definitely want to do before I put on the gold is to erase these. So that's easily taken off with a wipe, like I said, but I also don't want to wipe the blue into it. So I had to be really careful. It's so much better to be patient while you're painting a mural than go really quick with it, because you inevitably end up wiping some of the paint and then it streaks over the white, and then you have a bigger problem on your hands rather than just waiting. Okay, so I've let them dry a little bit. I've erased the charcoal lines off the cacti, and now I'm gonna give a second coat to both blues, put the gold in, and then hopefully the gray is gonna be dry and we can reproject the words onto the gray. The second coat is the perfect time to get those fine lines right along the edges, and also since there's kind of a texture to this. I make sure that I get in between the lines and there's no white spots showing. You can get a smaller paintbrush and do these fine lines, especially if you want it to be really crisp. But of course, it's not super necessary. It just kind of depends like how exact you want to get it. This 1.5-inch paintbrush, I like them because they can get it pretty crisp, especially since it's slanted. So I'm just going to go with that. And then I'm going to use this smaller one for inside the cactus. All right, so the gold went on really nicely. It's actually probably going to take 2 more coats because I can see through it quite a bit, but it's really metallic and very cute. So I'm excited about that. And this is actually looking pretty dry. So I'm going to go ahead and reproject the words onto this. I left my projector in the same exact position, so it should be pretty easy. And then I'm going to trace the words on. You could, of course, freehand. If you're great at hand lettering, like you probably are, then just do it freehand. I know exactly how I want it to be spaced on here, so I'm just going to project it, make it easy for myself. So let's do that right now. Okay, so I reprojected it in the same exact position. Everything should look pretty much the same. I'm going to use a little teeny tiny piece of white chalk to trace this because I don't really want to use black over these light colors anymore. So hopefully the paint's not too thick and this works out. All right, simple as that. So let's turn the lights back on, turn the projector off. We're done with the projector now, and we can go ahead and paint our lettering on. All right, so let's move on to painting the letters. Now that we've got them chalked on, I'm gonna do them kind of a dusty, darker purple. That'll go really nicely with this gray that's already on here. Kind of just gonna ad-lib this as I go. I just have like the loose letters written on. So let's mix up this paint. Of course, if you put on a color and it turns out to be too light or too dark, you can always do the second coat the right color. So it's not too big of a deal. This might be a little difficult. It's actually best to wait until everything's very, very dry to do lettering, because obviously to letter, you're probably gonna want to lean against the wall. But let's see how it goes. All right, so that's our first coat. I think it'll need one more, but in the meantime, let's give the gold another coat. All right, you guys never skimp on the second coat because it's very satisfying to see that full coverage from the second coat. I think the gold might only need 2, but we'll see. I mean, I guess right here on the edges, it might need 3 coats. It's hard to tell before it's really dry. And we're gonna let this purple dry a bit more. It dries so fast. If you put on a thin coat, it dries really fast and you can just do the second one and then it looks so nice. Okay, so this is our finished product. We have completed our mural, and honestly, that didn't take any time at all, hardly, for kind of transforming a part of your room. It's such a cool little thing to do. So I would totally suggest that you guys go try it yourself. Obviously, it wasn't that hard. If you guys want to learn how to do a bigger one or something that's a little bit more involved, my course goes through that and then also tells you how you can get clients and do this for people and get paid, all the things. But let's look at what our picture was. So we had this as our photo, and now we have this on our wall. Very cool. Not too hard. Hope you guys give it a try.
Okay, great. I mean, answered a lot of the questions, but I do have one question that I wrote it down to make sure that I asked it because it was at the beginning, and I know that people were wondering, and that is, what exact projector do you use and what do you recommend? Because I mean, you probably cover it in your course, but it's the biggest question that people are probably wondering.
Yeah, so the one that I'm using, it's an Akaso, which it was probably maybe $100 on Amazon, and honestly, it's decent. It works for most of my projects, but the thing about projectors is there's such a jump in them. The one before this, I had the $40 one that was ridiculous, but also I could do a project if I wanted something on my wall real quick. This one is fine for medium projects. If I wanted to step up, it'd probably be up to a $4,000 to $1,000 one, which I haven't needed yet because a lot of the spaces that I do, I'm gridding out. So I've been actually just waiting to have a project that needs it before I buy it, because I don't really need it setting in my room. But honestly, it's such a question. Everyone asks this, and I've actually talked to a lot of projector companies, and talked to a lot of people that like have tried out different ones, and there doesn't seem to be like a best of the best. And that's literally what I'm waiting for, is like the projector to come out. So if one comes out, I'll put it in the comments below.
Yeah, but I like your answer about like, you know, just buy what you need at the time and don't worry too much about it. As long as it projects onto the wall the distance you need it to, then it's going to work. Obviously, there are some that will work better in low light settings or high light settings. But like in my experience too, I just kind of plan for the fact that I'm going to need it to be sort of dark and so project. And if there's instances where like there's no way to get it dark other than waiting for nighttime, I just wait for nighttime to do it, you know.
Totally. And I feel like the entry point of like an $100 one is pretty easy, where like if you're going to pay $500 for a projector, that's like kind of tough to like make that investment right away. So just use like what you have until you need to step it up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and this is a question that I just really like asking people. What's the biggest screw up you've ever made? And I mean, specific to murals, I guess. What's the biggest mural screw up you've ever had?
It was probably last summer. I was doing this mural I had mentioned earlier on Town Square here in town. And it was such a short timeline. Like, we have really strict restrictions because of all the tourists that come. So the street was closing on, I think, June 20th. And this company had just talked about me doing a mural 1 week prior. And they're like, maybe it'll happen. And then 3 days later, they were like, well, the street's shutting. We need to do this in the next 4 days. And it was really big, like a 2-story mural. And I hadn't even started the design. And so I like rushed and like got them some designs. We like amazingly figured out a design, and I called my mom to fly in from Ohio so she could like paint the background as I was painting the mural. And I was feeling really good about it. We had like maybe 24 hours left, and I'm like starting to paint. It was a big moose. So I'm starting to paint the interior white. She's painting the blue. I'm starting on the black. And then in the mountains, like there's these sudden rainstorms that just like pop out of nowhere. And it was like super sunny, super hot. And then all of a sudden it's downpouring and all of the paint is just like running. It's like all the blue running into the white on the building. And it's in the middle of everyone's walking past seeing it. And I'm like, this is my nightmare. And I couldn't do anything because it's like downpouring. So we just had to like wait it out. And I'm like panicking. My mom's like, it's okay. And it stopped raining in probably like a half hour. And like I ran over to it. And luckily, like we had tons of wipes and were able to wipe a lot of the wet paint and like kind of make it better. We waited for it to dry and then went on with it. But it was okay. But like if I had been doing so many details and like it could have been so much worse. But it was, that stuff happens outside. That's why after that I was like, I prefer interior murals, everyone.
Yeah. But I feel like that kind of stuff and like the troubleshooting for all of that and planning for stuff like that is all stuff that you probably cover in your course, those are the things that overwhelm people. Because if I was ever to do a mural outdoors, I'd be like, what happens if it rains? What happens if all of these questions that I would have that would stop me from doing it, which I would just want to know up front. So
a lot more things can happen outside than inside, but it's all stuff that, I mean, like everyone says, you can paint over paint. Like it's fine.
Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that. Like if you screw it up, you just paint over it again. Okay. The last question I have before I let you go is, if you had to give one piece of advice to a brand new muralist or someone who wants to get into this, what would it be? It could be like as practical or as like vague as you want.
I would say to just go after the projects that you want. Like, I think a lot of people wait for projects to come along or think that they're not a muralist yet because somebody hasn't approached them for a project. But a lot of people, sometimes they don't even know that a mural would look good in their space. So, like everybody mocks it. Like so many of us have an iPad these days, like mock up a mural in somebody's space. Like even if you're downtown, take a picture of a cool blank building, put one of your like even lettering designs on there and then send it to the company. Like the worst that can happen is they say no. And maybe somebody sees it on Instagram and they're like, oh, but that would look good in my space. So just, putting yourself out there.
Love it. Cool. Okay. I lied. That wasn't my last question. My last question is just like, where can people find you and find your course? Obviously I'll link to it all down below, but tell us anyway.
Yeah. You can just find me at HaleyBadenhop.com. So look at that below because that's a weird name. And then my Instagram is Haley Bhop, so HaleyBhop. So those are probably the best spots.
Cool. And yeah, reminder to everybody, hit like on the video and put some sort of comment down below and you'll be entered to win a spot in Haley's course. But I'll link to the course down below too. And if anybody wants to check it out, it'll all be there. Thanks so much for coming on, Haley. I feel like even if people don't take your course, they'll get a lot out of that video. And if anybody creates a little mural in their house, definitely tag us both because we want to see it.
Seriously. All right, cool. Thanks for having me on, Becca. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was super nice to chat.